It sounds absurd even to me now. A cracked, sun-faded patio chair was the thread that unraveled everything I thought was solid. I see it every morning, sitting in the corner of my balcony like a ghost. The thing cost maybe $20, but it was worth far more in the truth it carried. I just didn't know that yet. Sophie, my fiancée, had been buzzing all week about her girls' weekend with Melissa, her old college roommate. She framed it like some sacred tradition. Just the two of them, out in the countryside, wine glasses in hand, phones on silent. The night before she left, I was on the balcony nursing a beer after work. Our little patio set was nothing fancy. 4 white plastic chairs around a matching table, the kind you could buy for cheap at any hardware store. But we'd made them ours. Last summer, we painted them a pale blue to match the balcony railing, laughing as we dripped paint everywhere. One of them, the cracked one, had a split along the back slat from when I dropped it during the move. Sophie always teased me for it. I was halfway through my beer when I noticed something off. 3 chairs sat neatly around the table, but the cracked one was missing, leaving an empty space where it usually sat. When Sophie came out to grab the laundry from the drying rack, I asked, "Hey, where's the 4th chair?" She glanced over her shoulder like she'd forgotten, then gave a quick smile. "Oh, Melissa's throwing a barbecue tomorrow. She said she's short on chairs, so I figured I'd give one of ours. You don't mind, do you? We barely use all 4 anyway." I laughed and shook my head. "You're lending out a chair? Should I be charging her a rental fee?" She rolled her eyes. "It's a chair, Alex. I'll bring it back." Her tone was light, and I didn't think twice. I pictured the chair in Melissa's big grassy backyard, surrounded by folding tables and kids running around. It was a harmless, even generous thing to do. Later that night, Sophie moved through our apartment, packing her bag. Sundresses, sandals, a floppy straw hat she claimed was for sun protection. She tossed in a paperback and a bottle of wine as if she were preparing for a spa retreat. "You sure you don't mind?" she asked, pausing at the bedroom door. "Mind what?" I said. "Me going away for the weekend." "Go," I told her. "You've earned it." And I meant it. We were coming up on our 2-year anniversary, and things felt steady between us. Sure, we had the occasional disagreement, who didn't? But nothing that made me doubt her. If anything, I was glad she had a friend she could escape with when life got stressful. The next morning, she was up before me. I woke to the sound of her zipping her suitcase and the faint scent of her perfume drifting through the bedroom. She leaned over to kiss me goodbye, her hair still damp from the shower. "Text me when you get there," I murmured, half asleep. "I will," she said, and a moment later, the door clicked shut. I got up in time to see her car pull out from the curb, the passenger seat piled high with her tote bag and a folded beach towel. The missing chair sat awkwardly wedged in the back seat, its legs jutting up like white plastic bones. I watched her turn the corner, the chair's cracked slat catching the early light for just a second before disappearing from view. It didn't strike me as strange then. If anything, it was almost funny, this image of Sophie carting around a $20 chair like it was some priceless antique. I went back inside, poured myself a coffee, and opened my laptop for a quiet morning of work. If I'd known that was the last normal moment we'd ever have, I would have stayed on that balcony longer, watching the car until it vanished. But I didn't. Instead, I went about my day, answering emails, folding laundry, and grabbing takeout for dinner. The absence of the chair didn't even register again. 2 days later, I was halfway through a limp tuna sandwich at my desk when my phone buzzed. A Facebook notification: "Eric tagged you in a photo." Eric was a coworker of mine, the kind of guy who went to every social event within a 50-mile radius. I figured it was another one of those Office Happy Hour albums where I'd been accidentally tagged in the background. Curiosity got the better of me. I clicked. The first photo loaded slowly, my office's spotty Wi-Fi struggling with the image. A bright expanse of sand filled the screen. Bare feet, beer bottles, and people in sunglasses grinning at the camera. I almost scrolled past. Beach parties weren't my thing, and I was just killing time between emails. But then something in the corner of the frame stopped me cold. Half buried in the sand, leaning at a lazy angle, was a white plastic chair. My white plastic chair. The faint blue paint we'd brushed on last summer was still visible along the side, uneven where Sophie's hand had slipped. The cracked slat along the back caught the sunlight just enough to cast a tiny shadow, the exact same one I'd seen every morning on our balcony. My first reaction wasn't anger. It was a confusion. Melissa's farmhouse was surrounded by nothing but open fields. The nearest beach was at least a 3-hour drive away. Why would my chair be here? I zoomed in, my thumb and forefinger spreading over the screen. The pixels blurred, but the details stayed clear enough. It was my chair. There was no mistaking it. The next photo in the set was taken from a different angle, and that's when my stomach dropped. Sitting in the chair, my chair, was Jake, Sophie's ex. He was shirtless, tanned, and leaning back like he owned the world. One arm draped casually over the cracked slat. His head was turned toward someone cropped just out of frame, but the grin on his face wasn't for the camera. It was the kind of grin you give when you're in the middle of a private joke. I hadn't seen Jake in years, not since a mutual friend's wedding. Back then, Sophie had made a big show of avoiding him. She told me they hadn't spoken since their breakup and that she'd never go near him again. I believed her. Now here he was, on the same weekend she was supposed to be tucked away in the countryside with Melissa, sitting in my chair on a beach hours away from where she claimed she'd be. A pit formed in my stomach. The third photo was a wider shot. Music equipment on a makeshift stage, a cooler overflowing with beer, people dancing barefoot in the sand. And right there, at the edge of the frame, a woman's arm, pale, slender, wearing a gold bracelet I recognized instantly. Sophie had worn that bracelet on our anniversary dinner last year. I dropped my sandwich onto its wrapper, my appetite gone. For a moment, I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe Melissa had decided to take a spontaneous day trip to the beach. Maybe Jake had just happened to be there. Maybe Sophie was standing just out of view because she was avoiding him. But the bracelet, the chair, the way Jake was leaning toward whoever was cropped from the shot, like she was the only person on that beach worth looking at. The office noise faded into a dull hum around me. My hands tightened around my phone until my knuckles ached. Melissa's farmhouse didn't have a beach. Sophie wasn't supposed to be anywhere near Jake. And yet, here was photographic proof that both those statements were lies. It wasn't enough to confront her yet. Not for me. I needed more. But the seed had been planted, and once it was there, it wouldn't stop growing. That stupid $20 chair had traveled farther than I'd ever imagined, and it was about to drag me straight into the truth I'd been too blind to see. That night, I sat in the dark, the only light in the apartment coming from my phone screen. The photo was still open. Jake leaning back in my chair, that familiar gold bracelet glinting just out of frame. I couldn't stop staring at it. Years ago, Sophie had made me promise never to bring her anywhere near that stretch of coast. It was where she and Jake had spent most of their relationship, and where, she claimed, the worst of their fights happened. Bad memories, she'd said, squeezing my hand. I don't even drive past it anymore. I'd believed her without a second thought. Now that promise felt like a rotten plank under my feet, splintering the more I thought about it. Other memories began to surface. The errands that took longer than they should have. The last-minute brunches with Melissa that somehow always popped up when I'd planned a lazy weekend together. The new perfume she'd started wearing. One she'd brushed off as a free sample from the mall. I realized I couldn't remember her actually buying it in front of me. I backed out of Eric's photo and pulled up Melissa's profile. Her feed was nothing but old wine memes and a throwback picture of her dog from last week. No mention of a girls' weekend. No beach. No barbecue. I scrolled back further, hoping for some clue, but there was nothing. Melissa wasn't even tagged in Eric's album from the party. The knot in my chest tightened. If Melissa hadn't posted about the weekend, and she wasn't in the party photos, then what exactly was Sophie doing with my chair buried in sand next to her ex? I opened Facebook's search bar and typed the name of the beach. Dozens of public posts popped up. Surfers, sunset shots, and selfies in front of the same stretch of dunes I remembered from my one visit there years ago. I filtered for posts from the past 2 days. That's when I found it. A blurry, wide-angle shot of the crowd from a woman I didn't know. The stage in the background. Jake is still holding court in my chair. And there, at the edge of the photo, caught mid-laugh, was the top of Sophie's head. I knew that exact shade of hair, the way the sunlight brought out threads of copper beneath the brown. Her hand was visible too, holding a plastic cup. The gold bracelet was unmistakable. It was enough. I set the phone down on the coffee table and leaned back, pressing my hands over my face. For the first time, I let the thought form without trying to swat it away. She's lying to me. Not a misunderstanding. Not bad timing or coincidence. A lie. The room felt smaller, the shadows thicker. Every noise from the street outside seemed far away, muffled, like I'd slipped underwater. I picked up the phone again, scrolling back through months of her tagged photos, looking for anything I'd missed before. A beach bonfire 2 months ago. She wasn't tagged, but Melissa was. Sophie had been running errands that night. 3 months ago. Another party. No location listed, but the same plastic cups and string lights I'd seen in the background of Eric's album. That weekend, Sophie had told me she was visiting her aunt. My stomach churned. I thought about the chair again. It had been a stupid little project, something we'd painted together one humid July afternoon, both of us laughing when I cracked the slat. She teased me about my heavy hands every time we sat outside. And now, somehow, that chair had ended up on a beach Sophie swore she'd never visit again. A beach where Jake just happened to be sitting with his arm over it like it belonged to him. The cracked slat, the blue paint, the bracelet, the hair, each detail piled on top of the last until there was no way to pretend they didn't form a picture. It wasn't a complete picture yet, but the outline was clear enough. I sat there for hours, the phone screen going dark, then lighting up again when I tapped it. My mind kept circling back to one question. How long had this been going on? The pit in my stomach hardened into something sharper. I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I wanted more than suspicion. I wanted something undeniable, because once I asked the question out loud, there'd be no going back. Rain pinned the city to the ground. It came in steady sheets against the window, a gray wash that made everything outside look far away and harmless. I pulled the shared tablet from the drawer of my desk and set it down like evidence. Determination had pushed denial into a corner. I wasn't guessing anymore. I was counting. The tablet still had Sophie's profile signed in from the last time she streamed a show. I tapped through the home screen to her messages. Most were boring group chats, memes, calendar reminders. Then I searched the words that had been living in my head. Beach, house, party, Jake. Nothing obvious. Of course not. I backed out and opened contacts. Names scrolled by in alphabetical order. Melissa, mom, nail salon, optometrist. Between M and N, one jumped out, Marlo. We didn't know any Marlo. I tapped it. The thread was months long and tidy. No emojis, no long paragraphs, just clipped sentences and timestamps that ran like train schedules. The most recent message was from Friday morning, the day Sophie left for the countryside. Marlo, traffic's lighter today. Leave by 9. Can grab the chair on your way. I felt that line like a pulled stitch. The chair. Our chair. Sophie. I told him I'm bringing it to Melissa's. We're covered. I scrolled up. There he was, hiding in plain sight in the messages before. References to playlists, to specific exits, to a door code I recognized from the beach house years ago. Marlo. Gate code same as before. 0829. The date of their anniversary back then. The one Sophie had once told me she wished she could forget. I breathed out slowly and kept going. 3 weeks earlier. Marlo. Sunsets better from the deck. Saturday? Sophie. Yes. Staying till Sunday. Told him I'm helping Melissa paint. 2 months earlier. Marlo. Bonfire. Bring the wine you like. Sophie. On it. He thinks I'm with my aunt. Every message fit neatly into the empty spaces of my memory. Errands, brunches, paint projects that never existed. It wasn't chaos. It was a schedule. It had rhythm. That was somehow worse. I put the tablet down and rubbed my eyes, the blue light leaving bright ghosts on the inside of my lids. Then I scrolled back to the beginning of the thread. The first message from Marlo was almost a year ago. The tone was cautious, coded. Later, as months passed, the guard dropped and the shorthand sharpened. What started as "Can we talk?" became "Same time," and then "Usual place." I opened the calendar app next. Sophie and I shared one so we wouldn't double book ourselves. Her entries were always neat. Brunch with M. Nails. Ants. Farmhouse. I tapped on one from 3 months ago that said, Farmhouse. The location pin was blank. Of course it was. But the time block, Saturday 10 a.m. to Sunday 3 p.m., sat perfectly over the same window. The messages mentioned a bonfire. I switched to photos. Sophie kept most of her pictures in the cloud, but the tablet had a handful of recent thumbnails, screenshots of directions, a menu from a seafood place I knew sat 2 blocks from the beach house, a close-up of a wrist with a gold bracelet, and an out-of-focus horizon beyond it. The date stamps lined up with the messages. I opened the wrist photo and zoomed in. The bracelet caught the light in a way I recognized from the party shot. In the reflection on the curved metal, if I squinted and tilted the screen, the ghost of a deck rail appeared. I remembered that rail, its chipped white paint flecked with salt. We'd leaned against it once, before all this, when Sophie had said she hated the ocean because it took everything and gave nothing back. Now it held her secrets like it had been built for that purpose. A message dinged, an automatic backup notification snapping me back. I took a breath and picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over Melissa's name. If I called her outright and asked, she could deny it, hang up, and warn Sophie. I needed something cleaner, less accusatory. A worried fiancé is checking in. I called anyway. It rang twice. Hey. Melissa sounded bright and unbothered. What's up? Hey, I said, keeping my voice casual. Just checking whether Sophie got to your place okay on Friday. She said she might be late heading back today. Weather's bad. Silence thin as a thread. Then, yeah, Melissa stopped. I could hear the TV in the background. Someone laughing at a canned joke. She's still with you? I asked, softening the edges of the question. Another pause. When she spoke again, her voice had moved a step away from the phone. I can't really talk right now, Alex. Sorry. Melissa, I said very gently. Is she there? I can't talk, she repeated too quickly. I'll tell Sophie you called. The line went dead. I stared at the screen, the call duration blinking out. The rain pressed harder against the glass. Melissa hadn't lied with words. She'd lied with a gap. A space left for me to fill with whatever version of the truth I could stand. But the hesitation had said everything. She was covering, not well. I set the phone down and let the room settle around me. The tablet lay open to a message from a month ago. Marlo, need the chair again? The deck is short a seat. Sophie, LOL. Sure. I'd laughed with her when we painted those chairs. I'd brought them home in the back of a borrowed pickup, proud that we'd made a place ours on a budget. Now, one of them was a punchline in a conversation I was never supposed to see. I kept digging because that's what you do when the ground gives way. You look for something solid to stand on. I pulled up our shared cloud drive and searched by location. The map bubbled with pins. I filtered to beach and last 12 months. 3 hits. One was a stock wallpaper. The other 2 were photos taken at dusk. Horizontal horizons. A hand in the corner. The same bracelet catching sunset light. No faces. But metadata doesn't care about faces. Cares about coordinates and time. I copied the coordinates into a map. The pin fell onto the street behind the beach house. My hands shook once. A quick shiver that ran through me and was gone. I took a sip of cold coffee and opened a note. I wrote dates, locations, and message snippets. An ugly little ledger. The rain became background music. When I'd filled a page, I stopped. The pattern was undeniable. Second weekends of the month, occasional Fridays when my schedule was busiest. Explanations mapped one-to-one to whatever Marlo had proposed. She hadn't tripped into this accidentally. She'd built it. The door clicked. I flinched, but it was just the neighbor across the hall. I realized how quiet our apartment was without Sophie in it. Even when she wasn't talking, her presence made a kind of noise. A drawer opening, a mug set down, the radio humming in the kitchen. Now there was only the rain and the digital scratch of my own investigation. I picked up the tablet again and scrolled to the very top of the thread. The first message from her. Sophie, we shouldn't. Marlo, we already did. And then, days later, Sophie, this stays between us. No photos. Marlo, obviously, they hadn't kept that rule. People never do. The world photographs itself now. I stood and paced the length of the room twice, the tablet warm in my hand. I wasn't sure what I wanted more, to scream or to hold on to the quiet for one more hour before I changed my life by naming what I knew. I sat back down and opened Melissa's messages. There weren't many recent ones. The last thread of substance was weeks-old shoe recommendations, a restaurant reservation that never happened. But months earlier there was a quick exchange. Sophie, Cover for me this weekend? Melissa. Always. I didn't screenshot it. I didn't need to. The word burrowed in anyway. When I finally looked up from the desk, the light outside had shifted from gray to something darker. I hadn't eaten. I didn't feel hungry. I set the tablet aside and stared out through the rain at the blurred shapes of taillights passing, each one carrying someone home to a story I couldn't guess. I thought about the argument we'd have. I practiced not yelling. I pictured the lines of defense she'd try. Nothing happened, it was just talking, you're overreacting, why were you snooping? I saw all of it as clearly as if it were already happening. And over it all, like a watermark, sat that chair, half buried in sand, holding a man I had never invited back into our lives. The tablet chimed again. A new message from Marlo. Marlo? Next month? Same plan. I watched the 3 dots appear under it, the typing bubble that meant Sophie was replying from wherever she was. It vanished, then came back, then vanished again. No reply landed. I closed the tablet and stood. The rain was easing. Across the room, our balcony door fogged faintly with the shift in temperature. In the corner, the 3 remaining chairs waited around an empty space like a missing tooth. I went out into the damp air and stood where the 4th should have been. I gripped the back of one chair and felt the plastic give a little under my hands. For the first time since I'd started digging, I didn't feel shaky. I felt steady. The truth wasn't a guess anymore. It had dates, times, coordinates, and a cover story with a friend who couldn't say the lie out loud. It had a contact pretending to be someone else. It had a cheap chair that had traveled farther than any promise I'd made with the person who took it. I went back inside, put the tablet in the drawer, and closed it gently. The decision was there, plain and simple. I didn't need to rehearse it. I just needed to wait for the door to open and ask the first question I already knew the answer to. By the time Sophie's key turned in the lock, I was sitting at the kitchen counter with a mug of coffee gone cold in my hands. The rain had stopped an hour ago, leaving the air outside still and heavy, the kind that makes sounds carry farther than they should. Her suitcase wheels clicked against the tile, and she appeared in the doorway with the travel smile people wear when they want to look unbothered. "Hey," she said, dropping the suitcase by the hall closet. "You're up late." "Yeah." I set the mug down and turned the sheet of paper toward her. The printout of Eric's beach photo, the chair planted in sand. "Recognize it?" Her eyes flicked to it, then away almost too quickly. "That's our chair," she said with a short laugh, like she was humoring me. "We, ran into Jake at the beach. Total coincidence." "Jake?" I repeated, letting the name hang between us. "Yeah, he was with some friends. We talked for a bit, that's all. Nothing happened." She pulled off her jacket and tossed it onto the back of a chair that wasn't missing a slat. "You're not seriously upset about a chair." I opened the folder on the counter. Out slid more printouts, screenshots from social media, the zoomed-in bracelet reflection, the cropped edge of her hair in another shot. I spread them in a slow, neat fan between us. "This isn't about a chair." Her jaw shifted. "Where did you get these?" "Does it matter?" I asked. "It does when you've been spying on me," she snapped, her voice lifting. "You went through my stuff, my messages? That's insane, Alex." "Spying would be planting cameras," I said evenly. "This is looking at what was already here, on a tablet we both use, tied to a calendar we both see." She scoffed, shaking her head like she was trying to shake off the whole conversation. "You're twisting everything. You're turning a couple of run-ins into some kind of conspiracy." I slid one last printout forward, the message thread with Marlo, the one that read "We're covered" right after mentioning the chair. "This was sent the morning you left." Her eyes narrowed. "You had no right." "I had every right," I said quietly, cutting through her words without raising my voice. "You've been lying to me for months. The right I had was to stop pretending I didn't see it." Something in her expression cracked for just a second, not guilt but calculation. Then the anger came in full, her hands gripping the counter's edge. "Do you have any idea how controlling you sound right now? Going through my personal stuff, interrogating me." "You're deflecting," I said. "You've been seeing him. I'm not asking if. I'm telling you I know." She glanced toward the hallway like she might just walk away from the conversation entirely. But I reached down and tapped the duffel bag propped against the kitchen island. "Your things are in there. Clothes, toiletries, whatever was yours in the bathroom." I left the rest for you to sort out later. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. You already packed my stuff? I nodded once. Before you walked in. That's wow. She gave a humorless laugh, running a hand through her hair. So that's it? No discussion. No letting me explain. You had months to explain, I said. You chose to lie instead. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the wall clock. Then she straightened, grabbed the duffel, and slung it over her shoulder. Fine. Keep the chair, she said, a bitter edge in her voice. Maybe it'll keep you company. I didn't move as she stepped into the hall. The suitcase by the closet stayed where it was. She hadn't touched it. When the door closed behind her, the apartment felt bigger but not emptier. I turned back to the printouts on the counter, gathered them into a stack, and slid them into a drawer I didn't plan to open again. Outside, the night air pressed against the windows, and from the balcony, the 3 chairs sat as they always had, in their crooked little arrangement around the missing one. That 4th chair would be back by morning, I figured. Not because I wanted it, but because she wouldn't. The mornings had turned cooler, the kind that made coffee steam curl in the air before vanishing. I sat on the balcony, mug in hand, staring at the 4th chair, the cracked, sun-faded one, sitting in its usual corner like nothing had happened. It wasn't just a chair anymore. It was a line in the sand. Maya came over one Saturday, balancing a grocery bag in one arm and a 6-pack of beer in the other. She stepped out onto the balcony and followed my gaze. You still have it? Yeah, I said. Haven't touched it since. She leaned against the railing, taking a slow sip from her bottle before speaking. Honestly, Alex, you're lucky. Better to find out now than 10 years in, when you've got kids and a mortgage and no way out without tearing your life apart. I let the words hang between us. I knew she was right, but it was strange to think how close I'd come to building that life with Sophie, completely blind to who she'd been seeing in the cracks between her excuses. A week later, I heard from a mutual acquaintance, someone who'd run into Sophie at a cafe downtown. She was alone, wearing the same gold bracelet I'd seen in the party photos. Over coffee, the acquaintance mentioned, almost casually, that Sophie had moved in with Jake after she left me. I felt the smallest twinge in my chest, but not the kind I'd expected. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't even anger. It was relief. And then came the punchline. It hadn't lasted. 2 months, maybe less. Jake moved on, Sophie moved out, and now she was staying with a friend while figuring things out. The story barely registered with me. If anything, it just confirmed what I already knew. None of it had been worth the lies she told or the life she threw away. The chair stayed exactly where it had been since the night she left, corner of the balcony, angled toward the railing, the cracked slat still catching the morning light. I never sat in it, never cleaned it, but I didn't throw it away either. Some days, I'd catch myself thinking about the chain of events it had set off. If Eric hadn't tagged me in that photo, if I'd scrolled past without looking closely, if I hadn't noticed the blue paint and the crack we'd laughed about when we painted it, I might still be in the dark. I might still believe Sophie was just visiting Melissa every couple of weekends. Now, it wasn't bitterness that made me keep the chair. It was proof. A reminder that sometimes the thing that blows your world apart isn't a screaming fight or a confession at 2 a.m. It's a small, ugly, everyday object that refuses to hide the truth when you happen to look at it from the right angle. Maya caught me staring at it again one evening as the sun went down. You ever gonna toss that thing? She asked. I shook my head. Nah, some things you keep. Not because they're worth anything, but because they remind you what you're worth. What would you have done if a random object tipped you off to your partner's betrayal? Think Alex should have confronted Sophie the moment he saw the photo? Or was it better to be sure first? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you like true betrayal stories like this, stick around and subscribe for the next one.